Ron James, your Paul George, your Kawhi Leonard, and they just don't have guys there. I mean, you feel like a guy like a Marcus Morris who ended up going to the Knicks, that would have been a great fit on this Rockets team. I mean, they could have really used a guy like Marcus Morris, actually, who can hit some shots and play some defense. So I think that's really one of the places that they need to improve, and they need to find a way to get someone who can fit in there. But with their contracts, I don't really know who they can trade because they're really, for the most part, on minimum contracts and maximum contracts outside of Capella. So, I mean, Jason, do you think there's a move for them to make, or is this just a situation where they're going to have to go into the season and kind of see if someone gets bought out or something like that?
Well, I think there are some guys out there that would take a veterans minimum deal to come play in Houston, but right now I think this roster is too thin to compete for a championship. So I'll be very interested to see how Houston does fill out its roster, all the way up until training camp in September, because I had forgot about House and Rivers. So they do have a couple of bench pieces. I think J.R. Smith would be a very interesting look, and I do think we'll see someone playing in the big three this summer ultimately end up in Houston, whether it's an Amari Stoudemire, a Joe Johnson, a Monte Ellis, somebody will be playing NBA minutes for the Rockets this year because there really are not that many guys left to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up going more for a smaller guy, maybe a Justin Holiday, a J.R. Smith, something like that. We'll see how that goes. But overall, Jason, I really do think that the fit for them is going to be a little better than people think. I think that um, they're going to split up the minutes an awful lot, and an underrated part of this is that while Westbrook definitely is a rebound stealer, he's a guy who is just not going to give his big men many boards. I mean, Clint Capella should probably kiss some of those rebounds goodbye. He had about 13 a game. He was fifth in the league last year, Jason. That's not going to happen this year with Russell Westbrook. There's going to be a nice little conversation early in the year that, hey there, big fella. When those balls are coming off the rim, I'm gonna be grabbing those for you and starting the break off. So you can go ahead and box out your man, but don't try to grab those. So I'm curious to see how that goes. I mean, on the other hand, Capella should get a lot of nice little dimes for dunks from Westbrook, who is great at passing his big men into nice open layups. But I think it'll be good for them to bolster that rebounding a little bit. All of that said, he is an above average rebounder at the position. He's going to really push the pace for the Rockets, which is another thing I think a lot of people are overlooking, that the Rockets, as good as they were in the half court, they don't get easy buckets in transition very much. They're not a team that pushes it. I think that if D'Antoni is smart here, there is a way for this to turn into a team that can sort of alter the pace a little bit from what they've done the last few years, get out on the break, get some points there. I think your concern is the most prescient one, though, Jason, is what's their depth going to look like? I think it would make a lot of sense for D'Antoni to expand his rotation this year, play closer to 10 than to 8 guys, but they need the bodies to do it. And like you said, Jason, they don't have it. So for the Rockets, I agree with you. I think they're contenders. But the way that they fill out now, kind of the ninth and 10th spots on the roster, because you figure we've got most of it kind of ironed out. We've got Westbrook, we've got Harden, who are going to probably occupy all the point guard minutes. You got Tyson Chandler and Capella, who are going to occupy all the center minutes. And then after that, you have Eric Gordon, Gerald Green, and Austin Rivers, and obviously PJ Tucker. So, there are a few guys there, but I don't know how many minutes guys like Tyson Chandler are going to play. And I think they're going to need to soak up some minutes at the 4. Someone's going to have to fill in there. So that's going to be kind of interesting to see. Any final thoughts on the Rockets before we move to the OKC side of this?
No, I'm pretty good. I kind of wanted to jumpstart the conversation on Chris Paul in Oklahoma City. I mean, first and foremost, I don't think that they can move him, and you can't buy out a contract that large because, contrary to popular belief, Chris Paul does deserve a lot of that money in that deal because of how well he's played over the course of his Hall of Fame career. So, I mean, do you see Chris Paul playing anywhere else this season other than OKC? Because right now, he's probably the only prominent player in the league right now that's not in the championship conversation.
It is. It's pretty interesting. I mean, I think there's a few other guys who are a little bit outside of that, but I will say this: That contract is going to be interesting, Jason, because he's got a max contract that is going to pay him, sit down there, folks, over $44 million in 2021. Now, this coming year, they might be able to live with that, but 85.5 million over 2020 and 2021 seasons, that is darn near unmovable. That's soaking up over a third of the salary cap for a team. That's going to be a tough pill for anybody around the league to swallow. And you're right, it's hard to buy him out because not too many owners are going to feel comfortable paying him a good chunk of that money, because the problem for Paul is he's not going to get that back, Jason. And I'm a little worried, Jason, to be honest with you, that this could get a little bit ugly with Chris Paul, because I'm not sure he's going to be real thrilled at the idea of sitting on a rebuild. And meanwhile, I don't know who's going to want to take him on for over $40 million for the next couple years after this next season. And that's going to make this kind of an interesting one, because I don't know who can take him on without getting into the luxury tax who's a contender. And so I don't know where this leaves the Thunder. And that's why I said before, Jason, I actually feel like a lot of this deal is more about getting off the Paul contract for the Rockets than it was acquiring Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of years, difference in age between Westbrook and Chris Paul, so that's definitely interesting. But I think a team to keep an eye out on, obviously, is the Los Angeles Lakers. I think come December 15th, when a lot of their free agents can be traded, I'd be very hard-pressed if I didn't think that LeBron would be on the phone trying to orchestrate a trade to get CP3 to Los Angeles, whether it's giving up, Rondo, Cousins, or any of these other expiring contracts, just try and make the salaries match. I mean, I can't see him really going to any other contender than the Lakers, and I think he would be good playing with LeBron and AD, and I think that LeBron would have the power to get him there. But the question is, with Presti already giving Paul George up and giving Westbrook up, is he really going to help a third contending team in the West? So that's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, when you look at that team, sure, they can trade a bunch of those guys, but then I'll tell you one thing, Jason. If you're the Lakers, you got to be very careful, because all of a sudden you're putting yourself in a very precarious position, because if you look at your team, then first of all, you need to keep Anthony Davis. Everyone's talking like Anthony Davis is signed, sealed, delivered. He has a player option for the year after next. If he's not happy with the way things go next year, he could say, I am out of here, Jason, and decide he's going to take his talent somewhere else. And while LeBron does have 2 years and lines up a little bit, one thing that would be disastrous for the Lakers is if you get Chris Paul. First of all, good luck filling out the rest of that roster. You look at that, you're going to have more than likely 3 players on a max deal, which is more than the cap right there. So you're going to be filling out the rest of your roster with mostly minimum guys. I don't think that's a championship team. Those 3 guys in minimums, I don't see it, Jason. So I don't know if the Lakers are as realistic for that reason, just because I don't think they can win the title with those 3 guys at this stage in Paul's career and just minimum guys, especially when they're not going to have any draft picks. I kind of keep an eye on the Heat. I think they're a team that might just kind of take a shot there. I mean, they've been known to kind of roll the dice. They have a little bit less of a clear path forward. They could give up some things that aren't exactly assets. They could ask for, the Thunder to take back some bad contracts. But, I mean, I think the overall lesson that I take from this, Jason, is I think that Chris Paul is a negative asset at this point. Don't you?
Yeah, it's crazy how far he's fallen. So I guess we both agree he starts the season in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think the Heat are a wild card. I don't count the Heat out for making a Chris Paul trade, but I think they would ask the Thunder to take all their bad contracts. So they would ask them to take Olynyk, take James Johnson, probably take Deion Waiters, and then I think the 3 of those guys would add up to around the salary. They'd take 1 extra year of salary on that. Those deals all expire after the 2020 season. Paul would have a player option for 2021, which he is almost certainly going to decide to pick up. So that would be interesting.
Depends. He wants a ring. He may end up leaving all that
Whew,
money on the table because it could go
44
down.
million. Whew.
I know. It'd be crazy not to take it, but he's going to be on the back nine of his career at that point. So we'll see if he values winning over money. But right now, Chris
Yeah.
Paul is as close as you can get to NBA purgatory. But I will say this: I mean, the Thunder have a core. I know they have a ton of picks coming, but they get an up-and-coming star like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You have a borderline all-star, at least last season, in Danilo Gallinari.
Yep.
A very serviceable center in Steven Adams, and then Chris Paul. So if they come together and they all buy in, they will be an interesting team to watch. And I'll have more on the Thunder in a little bit, but that's definitely something worth watching.
And how do you feel like the one thing with this team that's going to be very interesting to me, Jason, is they have these sort of these two incentives that are going in different directions. Because on the one hand, if you're the Thunder, your goal this season is to be as bad as possible. Start getting that draft pick train rolling. And so you almost have to wonder, if you're the Thunder, do you try to trade Paul even if you get negative value for him just to make your team a little worse? And will Chris Paul be okay having the Anthony Davis treatment? Because I think you're right. I think Paul is actually an interesting fit on this team. He fits at his best. At his best. I want to make a big kind of qualifier at the beginning of this because I don't want people coming after me after this. But I think at his absolute peak, he fits better on this Oklahoma City team than Westbrook just because of his shooting. And the addition of Gallinari adds a little bit of spacing, and suddenly guys like Andre Roberson, their shooting isn't going to be as big of a deal. Steven Adams has a little more room to rush the rim. And let me just say, Jason, if you want to buy some stock for fantasy here, Steven Adams is your guy this season because that man is going to be on the receiving end of a lot of lob passes. And I would bet you dollars to donuts, Jason, that if he stays healthy, that rebounding number from a year ago is going to skyrocket without Russell Westbrook on the floor with him because there's going to be a lot of boards that he's going to suddenly get to pick up. So I think that's going to be a pretty interesting thing to watch. But I'm curious to see how those kind of opposing incentives function on this team because the Thunder may decide they want to trade Paul, they want to trade Gallinari, they might even trade Adams. I wouldn't be surprised if they wait on Adams to kind of let his value get up and then try to deal him. But, I mean, what do you think happens this season with them, Jason? Do they stick it out, or do they try to get rid of these guys and just bottom out right away?
I'm going to save this for our end segment.
Okay.
I have a few things to say. I'm not going to give too much away, but with that, I think that brings our NBA offseason coverage pretty much to an end. And I'm going to give my hero of the week to the NBA offseason because, as far back as I can remember, there has not been a crazier 2.5 weeks in one sport than what we have just witnessed in the NBA. So my hero goes out to the league where you've seen like 8 of the all-NBA team members change teams. So many all-stars moved. There were so many moving pieces. So many teams are contenders right now. So I think the overall offseason, this roller coaster ride we've been on since the week leading up to June 30th when we did our preview show, it has been utter madness. So my hero is the NBA and how this offseason shaked out because we may never see one like this ever again.
I completely agree with you. And while we're talking about heroes of the week, Jason, there is other stuff that is going on. And one of them is the NBA Summer League. And I have to give my hero of the week to the Memphis Grizzlies, or I should say the Summer Grizzlies here, because those Summer Grizzlies won the Summer League title. Brandon Clark led the way for them. They have a lot of nice young talent. And for the Grizzlies non-summer edition, I think there's something here to get a little bit excited about. They decided to finally hit the reset button. They're one of the teams in the West, one of the few teams, Jason, that are not going to be trying to compete at all this season. I mean, outside of, I'm not even sure if there's a team more incentivized to lose right now than the Grizzlies. I mean, you could say the Thunder, but really all the other teams are going to be trying to win some games. So the Grizzlies are going to have a chance to really let these young